The old two-story house in the Boston suburbs maintained an elegant exterior, but inside, traces of time remained here and there. The creaking floorboards in the entrance hall, the slight soot around the fireplace, and the worn indentations in the stair railings, all these details were precious to Mary Wilson. "Emma, breakfast time." Mary called from the kitchen while pouring orange juice into a glass. Mary was tall with an artistic appearance. Her long brown hair was always loosely tied back, and her eyes reflected intelligence and warmth. "Mommy, the clouds in the sky are making funny shapes," 6-year-old Emma called out from the window. She was a child with an active imagination who could turn even the smallest observations into adventures. "Yes, they are. But we don't have time today. Your father is busy too." Richard came downstairs holding his coffee cup. He was a man who always took care with his appearance. Tall and handsome, he showed a charming smile especially to people related to his work. "I have an important business meeting this weekend. If it's successful, it'll be a big deal," Richard said as he stroked Emma's head. "My little princess, when Daddy comes back from his business trip, I'll bring you a wonderful present. Promise?" Emma looked up at her father. "Of course," Richard winked at his daughter. Mary quietly set the table, feeling a slight uneasiness about her husband's words. Recently, Richard seemed to be hiding something. There had been subtle changes in his attitude, especially during the 3 months since her mother had passed away. "How are the preparations?"
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit Stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
For the new exhibition at the Oliver Museum? Richard asked Mary. "There's still so much to do," Mary answered. "But it's an exhibition featuring female artists of the 20th century. It's a special project for me." Mary's talent as a museum curator was widely recognized. Her passion for art had remained unchanged since childhood, and sometimes she prioritized work over family time. This occasionally became a source of Richard's discontent. "By the way, I got a call from Mother," Richard said casually. "She says she'll be visiting this weekend." Mary inwardly sighed. Her mother-in-law, Helen Wilson, was a typical upper-class woman who behaved courteously on the surface, but never tried to hide her excessive interference and attachment to her son. To Helen, Richard was the perfect son, and Mary was a daughter-in-law unworthy of him. "I see," Mary feigned calmness. "Emma will be happy about that, I suppose." In reality, Emma also had complicated feelings about her relationship with her grandmother. Helen's affection was conditional, given only when Emma behaved like a lady. After breakfast, when Richard left for work, the house became quiet. Mary was sorting through her mother's belongings, thinking about what to do with the inheritance, which was substantial, though she hadn't made any specific plans yet. "Mommy, look at this," Emma came into her mother's office. In her small hands was an old photograph. "Oh, this is a picture of Grandma and me when we were young," Mary gently took the photo. "Do you miss Grandma?" Emma nodded silently. "Grandma told me the truth." "What do you mean?" "It's a secret," Emma said with a mysterious expression. Mary thought it was probably a product of a child's imagination. In the evening, Mary received a phone call from Richard. "I've decided to leave early tomorrow morning. I need to prepare for the important business meeting." "I see," Mary replied. A strange anxiety crossed her mind. During dinner, Emma was quieter than usual. Looking out the window, her expression had a concern that was unusual for a child. "What's wrong, Emma?" Mary touched her daughter's forehead. "I saw Daddy and Grandma having a secret phone call," Emma said in a small voice. "They thought I couldn't see them." Mary was momentarily surprised by her daughter's words but quickly remembered the richness of a child's imagination. "Daddy makes a lot of work calls. Now, it's bedtime." After putting Emma to bed, Mary headed to her office to finish planning documents for the Art Foundation. However, she couldn't concentrate. Staring out into the darkness, she was overcome by an inexplicable anxiety. The next day, Richard left earlier than usual. While organizing museum materials, Mary noticed Emma looking out the window. Tension ran through her small back, and she stood frozen by the windowsill, unlike the usually active 6-year-old. "Emma, what are you looking at?" Mary approached her daughter. Emma turned slowly and stared at her mother's face. There was a deep concern in her eyes that was unchildlike. "I'm waiting for something to come." "What's coming?" Mary asked with a smile. "I don't know." "But Mommy." Emma paused for a moment. "Do you remember Grandpa's old basement?" Mary stopped moving. The basement supposedly used by Emma's great-grandfather had already been sealed off when she purchased the house. She didn't remember mentioning its existence to her daughter. "Emma, where did you hear about that?" "I saw it in a dream. There's a secret room in the basement, a place to hide when bad people come." Mary was impressed by her daughter's rich imagination but also felt uneasy. The house's survey report had indeed mentioned an old servant's basement, but it was supposedly completely sealed off and inaccessible. "Yes, old big houses had places like that. But they're not used anymore," Mary explained gently. "Really?" Emma's voice was small. While preparing dinner in the kitchen, the phone rang. Seeing the name displayed on the screen, Mary hesitated for a moment. It was from her mother-in-law, Helen. "Hello, Helen," Mary put on a bright voice. "Mary, has Richard left yet?" There was an unusual tension in Helen's voice. "Yes, he left early this morning. He should have arrived by now." "I see." After a brief silence, Helen continued. "Let me know if you hear from him. I have an important matter to discuss." "Of course. Is there a problem?" "No, nothing. Just checking." Helen's voice suddenly grew cold. "And how is Emma doing?" "She's fine. A bit quiet, but..." "I see. Children often understand more than adults think they do." There was something meaningful in Helen's words. "I'll be in touch later." Right after hanging up, Mary heard the sound of a car engine around the house. Looking out the window, she saw an unfamiliar man slowly walking around the house. The man in a black coat seemed to be searching for something. "Emma." Mary hurried to the living room. "Let's not go outside today. Let's stay here and draw pictures." When night fell and Mary tried to put Emma to bed, she refused to go. "I want to sleep in your room, not here." "What's wrong? Did you have a scary dream?" Emma shook her head. "Daddy and Grandma are planning something bad. I overheard them." Mary was disturbed by her daughter's words. "Emma, that's not true. That's just your..." "It is true." Emma's voice grew a little louder. "I found house plans in Daddy's study. It said there was a secret passage. Daddy was looking at the plans while saying 'perfect' on the phone." Mary tried to calm her daughter, but Emma's serious expression made her feel anxious. "All right. Tonight we'll sleep together in my room. But tomorrow we need to talk properly about this." After putting Emma to bed, Mary called Richard. However, the call just kept ringing with no answer. As her anxiety grew, she sent Richard a message, but there was no reply. Mary picked up her mother's photo and pondered. Had her mother been concerned about Richard? Recently, in her mother's belongings, she had found a diary with the mysterious line, "Worried about R." Late at night, Mary's smartphone rang. It was a text message from Richard, coming back early tomorrow morning. "Have something important to discuss." Mary couldn't sleep, remembering Emma's words. Her daughter had a vivid imagination, but there was something different about her recent behavior. It was as if she truly knew something. Mary got up from the bed and quietly walked around the house. Richard's study door was usually locked, but tonight it was slightly open. Inside, there were neatly arranged documents on the desk, and nothing seemed unusual at first glance. But when she tried opening the drawers, the bottom drawer that was normally locked opened. Inside was an envelope labeled "Life Insurance Documents." With trembling hands, Mary opened it and checked the contents. A high-value life insurance policy newly contracted in her name. The beneficiary was Richard. The contract date was 1 week after her mother's death. "This is..." Mary murmured. She felt a chill on the back of her neck. Emma's warning suddenly seemed very real. As she was about to leave the study, she heard a car engine outside. Mary carefully peered through a gap in the blinds. A black SUV had stopped in front of the house, and an unfamiliar man got out. He was talking on his mobile phone, seemingly waiting for some signal. Mary hurried back to her room and lay down next to the sleeping Emma. Her heart was pounding rapidly. Mary woke from intermittent sleep. The morning light coming through the window was still weak, and the clock showed 5:30. She gazed at Emma's peaceful sleeping face beside her and felt somewhat relieved. However, that peace didn't last long. A faint sound caught her attention. The sound of a car door closing in front of the house. In the early morning silence, the sound resonated strangely loud. Was Richard back? What was the important talk he had mentioned? The life insurance documents she had found last night flashed through her mind. Just as Mary was about to get up, Emma's small hand firmly gripped her arm. When Mary turned, Emma was already awake, staring at her mother with a terrified expression. "Mommy." Emma's voice was trembling. "We need to escape right now." There was urgency in that small voice. Mary, confused, stared at her daughter's face. "What? Why?" Emma was clearly trembling with fear. Her small body was stiff with tension, and her eyes were moist with tears. "There's no time, we need to leave the house right now." Mary was confused. It was clear that her daughter was genuinely frightened. But what were they running from? Richard? Or the suspicious man she saw last night? Either way, Emma's fear was real. Mary instinctively felt she should trust her daughter. "All right," Mary decided. "Get dressed quickly, and only take what's necessary." She quickly took a small bag from the closet and put in cash, passports, a mobile phone, and her mother's keepsake locket. Emma hurriedly changed into her clothes and hugged her favorite stuffed animal. "Mommy, hurry," Emma urged, anxiously looking out the window. Footsteps were heard at the front door. The sound of a key turning. And then multiple footsteps. Mary's heart raced. "Emma, it seems Daddy is back," Mary said, trying to appear calm. "Do we really need to leave? Shouldn't we talk to Daddy about this?" Emma shook her head vigorously. "No. Daddy and Grandma are trying to kill Mommy. They want the money Grandma left." Mary gasped at her daughter's words. "Emma, why would you say such a..." "I heard it. Daddy was talking to Grandma on the phone." Emma's expression was serious. "Daddy said, if Mary is gone, everything becomes mine. And then, we just need to make it look like an accident." The life insurance documents she had seen last night came back to Mary's mind. A high insurance payout. Richard as the beneficiary. Contract signed right after her mother's death. And, above all, Emma's frightened expression. All of these might not be coincidences. "I understand," Mary said in a trembling voice. "Let's go down quietly. We'll leave through the back door." The two began quietly descending the stairs. However, Richard's voice could be heard from the living room. He was talking to someone. Mary stopped midway on the stairs and listened to the voices. "Is everything ready?" Richard's voice had an unfamiliar coldness. "I'm counting on you for operating the security system. Timing is crucial." Another man's voice responded. Understood. I'll activate it as soon as I get the signal. Mary froze in terror. She quickly pulled Emma's hand and headed towards the back door through the kitchen. Holding their belongings, she grabbed the doorknob. But it wouldn't turn. It won't open. Mary murmured in panic. Mommy, Emma's voice echoed softly. It's locked from the outside. At that moment, the smell of gasoline began to drift around the house. The strong odor of chemicals invaded through the windows. Simultaneously, the house's security systems suddenly began to activate. There was no alarm sound, but metal shutters installed on windows and doors started to descend all at once. It was happening. They were trapped. Emma! Mary cried out in fear. She desperately tried to find another exit. But all windows and doors were completely sealed with metal shutters. Mary was about to fall into panic, but Emma's calm voice brought her back. Mommy, this way. Emma remained calm. There's a hidden door behind the pantry. Following Emma's lead, Mary headed to the kitchen pantry. Behind the grocery shelves was a small door, not noticeable at first glance. Emma unhesitatingly moved the shelf and pulled a hidden handle. A small door opened, revealing a dark passage. Emma, this is. Mary was astonished. Neither Daddy nor Grandma know about this. I found it, Emma said proudly. Grandma told me. In my dream. Mary hesitated for a moment. The fear that this might be a trap crossed her mind. But somewhere in the house, she began to hear the sound of fire burning. The smell of smoke was gradually intensifying. She had no choice. Emma, you go first. I'll follow right behind you. Mary guided her daughter into the passage. The narrow passage seemed to be an old secret servant's passage. Dust and cobwebs hung from the ceiling, suggesting it hadn't been used for decades. The passage was so narrow that they had to crouch to proceed. Mommy, are you okay? Emma turned and asked. She didn't seem afraid. Rather, she had an expression full of certainty, as if being guided by something. I'm fine, Mary tried to smile, but her heart was pounding with fear. Questions kept surfacing in her mind. Was Richard really trying to kill her? Just for the inheritance? How did Emma know about this passage? After walking for a while, the passage gently sloped downward, continuing underground. Do you know where this leads? Mary asked. Yes. It comes out under the shed in the garden. Grandma told me. The smell of smoke grew stronger, and behind them came a loud sound like an explosion. The fire seemed to be spreading rapidly. The two hurried through the narrow passage, almost crawling. Finally, a small light appeared at the end of the passage. It was a small door embedded in the basement wall. When Emma pushed the door, it opened with a creak of rusty hinges. Beyond it was the underground space of a shed a little distance from the house. Hurry, Mary lifted Emma and rushed up the shed stairs. When they opened the shed door, the fresh morning air greeted them. Looking back, the house was already engulfed in flames. Black smoke rose high into the sky, and the sound of sirens was approaching the neighborhood. Mommy, let's go to Barbara's house, Emma suggested. Barbara was Mary's close friend who lived 2 houses away. Mary held Emma tightly. Emma, you saved my life. Emma looked up at her mother's face. There was an adult-like calmness in her eyes. Grandma is watching over us. She knew about Daddy's plan. Mary trembled at her daughter's words. There was a certainty about them that seemed beyond a child's imagination. The two hurried to Barbara's house. Barbara was just making her morning coffee. When she opened the door, there stood Mary and Emma, soiled with soot. Their expressions were etched with an indescribable terror. Mary! What happened? Barbara quickly invited them inside. Barbara, call the police, Mary's voice was trembling. Richard, Set fire to the house, tried to kill us. Though the words were hard to believe, Barbara didn't hesitate to reach for the phone. Outside the window, black smoke was already rising, and the sound of sirens was approaching. By the time the police and fire trucks arrived, the Wilson house was already engulfed in flames. As firefighters battled the fire, officers took statements from Mary and Emma. Mary, though confused, insisted that this was not an accidental fire but a premeditated attempted murder. "Ma'am, that's a serious allegation," an older detective said. "Do you have any evidence?" With trembling hands, Mary took out her mobile phone. "Last night, I took pictures of life insurance documents I found in my husband's study. Recently, he took out a high-value policy in my name." The detective looked at the photo and frowned. "This alone is not enough. Also, my daughter Emma overheard my husband's conversation." Mary placed her hand on Emma's shoulder. Emma began speaking in a small voice. "Daddy was talking to Grandma on the phone. He said, if Mary is gone, everything becomes mine. Then he said, the trick is to make it look like an accident." The detective looked at Emma kindly. "When and where did you hear this?" 3 days ago. Outside Daddy's study, Emma answered the details accurately. "Daddy was talking on the phone and didn't notice me. Then he was looking at the old house plans. He said, the security system modification is complete." By the afternoon, the situation at the scene had changed drastically. The fire investigator announced preliminary findings. "This is clearly arson. Traces of gasoline were detected around the house. Furthermore, the security system was deliberately modified to allow remote locking of windows and doors from the outside." Detectives hurried to locate Richard Wilson. It quickly became apparent that his claimed business trip was a lie. His colleagues at work testified, "We hadn't heard Richard was going on a business trip." In the evening, Richard was found at a gas station on the interstate highway and arrested. Documents for identity fraud and a large amount of cash were found in the trunk of his car. "I'm innocent," Richard shouted in the interrogation room. "This was all my mother's plan. She coerced me." Helen Wilson was also arrested at her home. At first, she maintained her composure, but when she learned that Richard was blaming her, her attitude changed completely. "That ungrateful son. I sacrificed everything for him." As the investigation progressed, the full extent of the horrific plan was revealed. Richard was actually in serious financial trouble. His position at the investment company was just for show, and he had been in debt for many years. Additionally, he had a mistress and was planning to start a new life using the inheritance left by Mary's mother. "It seems he had been living a double life for years," the detective explained to Mary. "After your mother's death, he set his sights on her estate. He seems to have become impatient when you didn't decide what to do with the assets." "I wonder if my mother noticed something," Mary murmured. Surprisingly, evidence was found in Mary's mother's diary showing that she had noticed Richard's true nature. There was an entry stating, "Richard approached me about an investment, but I declined after learning his company was in financial trouble." She had been trying to warn Mary but died suddenly from illness. The trial began 3 months later. The prosecution presented extensive evidence. Numerous planned conversations between Richard and Helen were discovered on Richard's mobile phone, revealing detailed plans to make Mary and Emma appear to have died in an accident. The defendant, Richard Wilson, meticulously planned to kill his wife and daughter to obtain the inheritance, the prosecutor addressed the jury. He modified the house's security system and executed the cold-blooded plan of trapping his wife and daughter and setting fire to the house. The defense tried to question Richard's mental state, but he suddenly changed strategy and tried to place all responsibility on Helen. "Mother was manipulating me. I couldn't escape her control." However, this strategy backfired. Helen was infuriated and testified surprisingly frankly about her years of doting on and controlling her son, as well as her own role in this plan. "I was determined to do anything for my son's happiness. Mary wasn't worthy of him. I thought if she was gone, Richard could achieve the success he was meant for. But the most important witness at the trial was Emma. With a composure far beyond her years, she testified about overhearing her father and grandmother's conversation, finding the house plans, and being told about the existence of the secret passage in a dream by Grandma. "Who is this grandma you're referring to?" the prosecutor asked. "Mommy's mommy," Emma answered simply. "She told me that Daddy was planning something bad." A quiet emotion spread among the jurors. The pure belief and courage of a 6-year-old girl had saved 2 lives. Ultimately, both Richard and Helen were found guilty. Richard was sentenced to 15 years for attempted arson and attempted murder, while Helen received an 8-year sentence for conspiracy. Outside the courthouse, Mary held Emma tightly. "You saved our lives, Emma." Emma looked up at her mother. "Mommy, it's just the 2 of us now, isn't it?" "No, we have each other," Mary smiled. "And it seems Grandma is watching over us too." They walked away hand in hand. 6 months after the trial, on an autumn afternoon, Mary was looking out the window of her new home at the garden where fallen leaves were dancing. This house, purchased in a small town in the Boston suburbs, was much smaller than their former luxurious mansion, but it was filled with warmth. "Mommy, look." Emma came home from school and showed her a drawing. "The teacher said my picture will be in the art exhibition." Mary took her daughter's drawing. It depicted 3 women, Mary, Emma, and Mary's mother. "Wonderful, Emma. Grandma would be happy too." Emma smiled. "Mommy, I'm glad I told you to escape that day." "Me too," Mary embraced her daughter. Since that incident, Emma had shown remarkable resilience with the help of the psychological counselor, Michael Foster. She had made friends at her new school and was beginning to develop her artistic talents. Mary herself had also resumed her work at the Oliver Museum while dealing with her emotional wounds. She was also advancing plans to establish a foundation to support young female artists, using part of the inheritance from her mother. "Have you decided on a name for the new foundation?" Emma asked. "I'm thinking of calling it Reverse Dream." "It means a first step towards a new dream," Mary answered with a smile. Meanwhile, Richard's days in prison were bleak. He repeatedly applied for sentence reduction, continuing to claim, "It's a false accusation created by my wife's delusions and my daughter's imagination." However, the evidence presented by the prosecution was overwhelming. His colleagues at his company also testified about his years of dishonesty and lies. Most ironic was the collapse of the relationship between Richard and his mother, Helen. Richard's blaming of his mother during the trial had created an irreparable rift between them. Helen was isolated in prison and was called the most pitiful prisoner. She only repeated to other inmates, "It was for my son." One day, Mary was doing a final sort of her mother's belongings. Among old notebooks, she found an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from her mother stating, "Richard approached me about an investment, but I declined. I found out his company was in financial trouble." The date was 2 weeks before her mother's death. Mary submitted this letter to the police. This led to an additional investigation into Richard, and suspicions began to surface regarding her mother's death as well. The cause of death, thought to be natural. Mary tried to push away that thought. On Christmas Eve, Mary and Emma were spending time in front of the fireplace. Emma's psychological counselor, Michael, had also been invited, and the 3 shared a warm evening together. Over the past 6 months, Michael had gradually become part of Mary and Emma's lives. At first professionally, then as a friend, and now as someone like family. "Mommy," Emma suddenly asked. "What is a real family?" Mary thought for a moment and answered gently, "It's not about blood ties, but about caring for and protecting each other." Emma nodded as if understanding and said, "That's why we were able to become a real family." After thinking a bit more, she continued, "Weren't Grandma and Daddy family? They loved each other, but it wasn't a healthy love, Mary explained gently. True love means wishing for the other's freedom and happiness. It's not about using someone for your own desires. Emma looked at Michael and smiled. What about Michael? Can Michael become part of our family? The two adults exchanged glances, and Mary's cheeks turned red. Michael smiled gently and replied, "That's something we'll all talk about someday." Snow had quietly begun falling outside the window. A sense of anticipation for a new year and a new beginning enveloped this small house. Mary held Emma tightly. Your courage created our new life. With these words, they were taking a step towards a bright future.